Hello, welcome to our today's webinar on first steps in the Consent Manager interface, specifically in the new Consent Manager interface. First steps, what you need to do there, how it will look like, etc. And that's the agenda for today. A quick introduction in the new interface. As said, how it looks, where do you find these things? If you're used to the old interface, basically where you do the things in the new interface. If you don't knew any of the interfaces, so if you're new to Consent Manager, then it's basically an introduction to how to use the Consent Manager. Then we will have a quick run through the integration of the codes, the different versions of the codes, how to put them in the website, etc. And then at the end, we will have some views on the new add-ons that we have for the whistleblowing and the privacy-friendly analytics. At the end, hopefully, we will have some time for some questions and answers. In Teams, in Zoom, we're here in Zoom, there is it says F&A or Q&A. So there's a box in the Zoom tool where you can click on it and then you can put your questions in there. So please feel free during the webinar to already collect your questions, put them in the box there, so that we have them, and then at the end of the webinar we will go through them if we have some. The whole webinar will be recorded. We will put the webinar on our website. That's consentmanager.net/knowledge, and there's a video section in the knowledge base, so that you can look at the webinar later if you want. So that's the introduction, and let's go to it. First steps, Consent Manager interface v2. The first information there, so the ones of you that are used to the old interface, that's here on the left side, you will need to switch at one point. This point is latest by end of the year. So with the update in December, that's the 16th of December, we will disable the old interface, and then you need to use the new interface. So once you log in, you will automatically be in the new interface. You can already start using the new interface. There is a link under the menu. Basically, if you go in the menu, scroll down, there's this yellow box with a link that brings you into the new interface. For those of you that have a new account, so if you registered in this year, then you will most likely already have the new interface. So you probably never seen the old interface. Then you keep working in the new interface. So just for you that you know in which you should look. Then let's dive right into it. I will just open my browser window and guide you through the interface window number, this one. So that's what you see if you have a new account. Basically, that's what I did yesterday. I just created a new account, and that's what you see if you have a new account. First step is you run through a wizard when you create an account. So you should have a CMP in there already, some settings, maybe some cookies, etc. But I will just guide you through the whole thing real quick. So when you log in, you end up on the dashboard. It's a quick overview for you. At the moment, it's empty, right? There's no data and nothing in there. But the dashboard will give you some quick insights on how many page impressions, how many consent screens did you have, what kind of traffic, what's the acceptance rate. Some overview on the actual rates, basically how often the banner was shown, how many choices were made, what's the acceptance rate, etc. So that you have an overview on these different different ratios, the different rates that you can have. A quick compliance check. So if you have created a CMP, if you integrated information on the crawler, if the blocking was found, some more information. There you also find our checklists for GDPR, CCPA, etc. So you can just download the PDFs there just to get some guidelines on basically best practices, what you should do. Also, you find this first steps box here in the first 14 days or something. I think the box is there, so that you find the usual task like right from here. And the interface itself is pretty simple, right? You have on the left side, you have the main menu, so the dashboard, the CMP. So CMP is basically a cookie banner where you have all the cookie banner settings. The design settings, designs are separate from CMPs because you can use one design in multiple CMPs. So you can combine them. That's why there's two separate menu points. Then we have the compliance section. That's where the crawler is and these kind of things. A reporting section with basically an overview on the data, a bit like what you have on a dashboard, but more fine-tuned. And then we have the two add-ons with the whistleblowing and website analytics. We'll show you later this. Then you have the link to the help down there. Account settings where you can see your contract on all these things, and some notifications. If you click on notifications, then you will basically see your tasks or things that the system will notify you about. So that's the account. And then once you click on something, for example, on the CMPs, there will be a modal that opens, so a new window where you have your CMPs. I just have one. You can either have them in like this box view here, or you can change the list view, you can filter, etc. Basically, you choose your CMP, and then you have the second menu with more details on the CMP. So I just created a CMP test.de, but you can always click back there and choose the next one. And what you do in order to do the setup is basically you create a CMP. I said a CMP is a cookie banner. It can be for one website. It can be for multiple websites. It can be an app. It can be multiple apps. It can be apps and website. Doesn't matter. At the end, it's just an entity. I called it www.test.de, but it can also be like, I don't know, my CMP or whatever you name it. So it's just an entity. We have some general information about this CMP. For example, you can have some notes. You assign it to an industry and a website type. You choose your logo or your designs that you want to use. Let me just take this here, for example. Color schemes, some icons, the languages that you want to support. You see there's more settings down there. I don't want to go too much into detail, but basically there's a lot of things that you can do there. What you need to know is you don't need to do any settings. In most cases, the default settings in the system are already good enough for most of the clients. It's always good to just take a look and just adjust the settings that you might want to change. But in most cases, you don't need to change them. What you want, where you want to pay attention on is this domain section here. So when you use the system later, the system will collect the domains where you put where you installed the code. The system will ask you to approve or reject these domains that were found. So I just had my code on consentmanager.net. So and that already approved it. So basically, if it's the new domain, then you will have a link, approve, reject, and then you tell the system, yes, that's my domain, please show the code there, or no, that's not my domain, please stop this. So the domains will appear there. You will also have notification when you need to do something. So you see these red dots here everywhere, and you will also see the same information on the notifications. Yeah, so basically, as I said, what you do is you create a CMP, work your way down in the main menu. As I said, general settings is just, as it says, general settings. Maybe there one node for the designs. You can choose one design. You can choose multiple designs. So if I could just go and say, okay, I want to have these designs here all. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 designs. If you have multiple designs, then basically these designs will rotate. Designs can have a targeting, meaning designs can be specific to a certain type of users, so French users or desktop users or whatever. If the designs don't have a targeting and multiple designs are available for the same user, then these designs will rotate. So one user will see the one design, the other user will see the other design, etc. And if I have now 5 designs, then basically each design will get 20% of the users. This way is how you can also run A/B tests, create multiple designs, multiple color schemes, and then later in the reports, for example, you can see which design works best and how certain designs work for certain groups, etc. There's also an optimizer in there, meaning there's an A/B testing, there's a machine learning for the A/B testing that will basically take the results that the designs generate learn from it and then apply these learnings, meaning it will show the design that seems to work best for each group of users and prefer this design over the other designs. So it will learn and say, aha, okay, this design works best for, I don't know, mobile users, then it will show this design more to your mobile users and not the other designs, for example. So that's the general settings. Then you have a privacy policy setting where you put in your imprint, your terms and conditions if you have. Your privacy policy, either as a link, you just, www.sde, I don't know, privacy, some things like this. Or we have an integrated privacy policy generator, which you can use where you just give it some information, give some configuration, and then basically our system will generate a privacy policy based on these settings and based on the purposes and vendors, etc., that you have in your system, in order to basically have an always up-to-date privacy policy. Just a quick look at how this looks. It's here, you can have a preview. So basically, that's my privacy policy for test.de, some data and a lot of text. And you see, for example, the vendor list is already in there with the vendors that I have in my system. So it's dynamically generated, and you don't have to deal with the text. You don't have to deal with updating these things. These things come directly from the system. So that's the privacy policy. Then we have some crawler settings. Basically, when you have the code in your page, the crawler will start visiting your page. There's certain things that the crawler can do. It can notify you, and then you can set, what kind of notifications you want, how often, etc. What shall the crawler do if it finds new vendors and new cookies? So either it can put these vendors and these cookies on a waiting list in a queue, basically, and then you need to manually approve these vendors and say, yes, they should be in my list. Or it can automatically put them into the list so that you don't have this manual step in between. Things like this. There's more settings everywhere. I don't go too much into detail because we also just have 1 hour here today. So that's the crawler settings. Then on the legal side, there is some settings on how we do the protocol. Do we store IP addresses? How long do we store this stuff? What do we do with users that gave consent? When shall we ask them again? You can separate this, like users that gave consent, we ask them after a year, but users that have rejected, you might want to ask them a bit sooner, 14 days maybe. Users that made a custom choice, maybe also 14 days. So you can customize these things. You can also customize the consent scope. So if you have multiple websites or if you have multiple CMPs, the scope defines whether they should share consent information. So if I switch from one website to the other, or if we switch from a part of the website that uses the one CMP to another part that uses another CMP, should I bring my consent information or should the consent layer appear again? That's what you do with consent scope. And then you have a lot of countries and regions. So you have Europe, Great Britain, Switzerland, a lot of US states, Brazil, Canada, and yeah, you see a lot of states. So that's where you enable the system, or where you tell the system what you want to support, where you want to, which legislations or which regulations you want to support. For our clients, in most cases, Europe, and so GDPR and e-privacy is the most important. It's by default enabled in all their accounts. So if not, or if you don't want to use it, then you can disable it. Otherwise, if it's not enabled, you just enable it. Same with the others, right? So if you're a Swiss client, for example, you just enable Swiss and say, okay, it should be in Switzerland, or I don't know, in Europe, or whatever logic you want to use. You can, for all of these, you can set the logic. So if it's an opt-in or opt-out, typically in Europe, for example, it's an opt-in. So you need to give consent, while, for example, in the US, it's more an opt-out regime, right? So you're already in when you come on the website, and then you need to find the button to get out of the data processing. And this you can basically do for all these regions and for all these different laws. Same for the recall icon. So that's the preference icon that's shown on the left or lower or right lower bottom of the page, so that the user can reopen the consent layer. So basically, you configure this all. Depending on which you have on, you will also see more or less options in other settings. So if I only enable GDPR, then I will only have the legal basis for the purposes in Europe. If I also enable, I don't know, FLDP, so for Switzerland, or Canada or something, then I will have more options in these things also for Canada and Switzerland. So that's the legal part. On the integration side, there is a lot of APIs that we have integrated. The most, let's say, most typical is the Google Consent Mode. Since I think March this year, you need to have Google Consent Mode activated if you have Google Analytics or Google Ads or the Google Advert tracking. So the consent mode, or all these APIs are basically a way of how the CMP, the consent manager, can signal to these companies that consent was given, right? So there's an analytics code on the page. We send a signal to this analytics code so that they know, okay, consent was given. They can do some tracking or some more tracking than usual. So the most typical case, as said, is Google Consent Mode. You just enable it there, and then there is some advanced settings that you can do. With Consent Mode, there might also be some other basically additional settings that you might need to do on your website or in your Tag Manager, depending on your setup. There is a whole section on Google Consent Mode in our help. So if you look at help.consentmanager.net and search for Google Consent Mode, there is a lot of stuff that you can find there, including videos, different sections for how this works with the different integration versions and apps, etc. Lots and lots of information. Also on this page, you have the industry standards. So the typical one there is the IAB TCF for Europe, or IAB GPP for the US. So that you just enable it there, or this one, or the US states, depending on which standards you want to support. And then the system also will enable these APIs for these standards. I will not go too much into details there. That's a whole new field there. Also in the menu, you have the controller settings. That's just for information about your company. You basically can just, if you enable it, you will have an additional menu item in the consent layer that will show this information in order to inform about the data controller. That might be necessary in some countries or in some regions, especially in countries where where websites don't typically have an imprint. So in Germany, for example, we all have an imprint, but in I don't know, in France or Spain, it might be not so typical. So then this controller page can be helpful. Lastly, some other settings about how the auto blocking should work, what kind of cookies, further stuff. I don't want to go too much detail. But as said, as usual, you can just leave them as they are. In addition, we have a publishing and staging feature, meaning if enabled, you can have basically two CMPs, a staging CMP, so one for your test page and one for your live page. You would do all the changes, all the settings in the staging CMP. You would test it on your website and one on your testing website, on your staging website. And only when you're done changing and when you're happy with the changes, you click on publish and chain, and these changes will be copied into the live CMP. That brings you the advantage that you can test everything before. So you know that you know what kind of result you can expect. The downside is you need to have one click more before it's live. For smaller clients, we usually don't recommend this because it's just one step more complicated. If you don't use the staging, then all the settings that you do usually go live within 30 minutes. So there's a 30-minute cycle basically in which the changes that you do automatically go live. So that's the general settings. The main information there is also these. You can always change these settings. Same for the purposes, cookies, vendors, etc. You can always change them. The codes that you integrate into your website will not change. The only moment when the codes that you put on your website change is the case when you add a new language. At the moment, we have like 35 languages or something. Let's say you want to support, I don't know, Korean language that we don't have, then you can go into the account settings, create Korean language, fill it with information. That's the only case when the code actually changed. So you can always go back and change in the system. So then for each CMP, we have a list of purposes, cookies, and vendors. purposes list is basically, as it says, the purposes, so the functions that these vendors do, or the data processing activities that are done on your website. We have this, what we call the classical purposes, so function, marketing, preferences, measurement, other, and social media. If you use the IBTCF, then you have the TCF purposes there. There's some predefined wording that they have. With the classic purposes, you can also just always rename, right? So you can just go in there and say, no, I don't want to have it marketing. I want to have, I don't know, advertising or something. You can always change them. Can disable them if you're saying, okay, I don't want to have this. I just want to have these three. It's all up to you, right? It's nothing in the system is fixed. You can always customize. With the purposes, you have the vendors. So the vendors will be assigned to each purpose. So you might want to think which purposes you want to use, or when you have the vendors, you see which vendors you have, and then you create the purpose accordingly. With the CMP, you also have the cookie list. That's basically created by the crawler. So once the code is on the page, the crawler will go on your website, find all these cookies, put them in the list here. The crawler will try to classify the purposes, like function, marketing, etc. Assign the vendors to the cookies. There will always be, I mean, there's so many, I think we have like 7 million cookies in the list, or something like this. There will always be cookies that are not automatically assigned. So where you will need to make a choice and say, okay, that's, I don't know, preferences or something. Same for the vendors. It is good if you do this. So if you go through the list and check if there are some cookies and assign them, it is not an issue if you don't do it. It's not a technical issue if you don't do it. The whole cookie list is only an information towards your users so that the users can get informed. It does not have a technical implication, meaning the whole accepting, rejecting is based on vendors and purposes. This is not based on cookies. So if I click on accept, I accept a certain vendor, let's say Google Analytics, and therewith Google Analytics can set all cookies, whatever they want. And it doesn't matter if I assigned these cookies or if I did not assign these cookies. So that's why I said it's good if you take some care here, because your users should get informed, but don't worry if you don't assign a cookie to the right type or the right vendor, etc. It doesn't really matter technically. That's the cookies, and then I said we have the purpose of the cookies. We have the vendors. The crawler will give you the vendor list. It will show you, okay, you have 4 vendors. What shall we do with these? Add them to your vendor list, or you say, no, I have this on the page, but I don't want this vendor. We recommend not just to ignore the vendor. I mean, there can always be cases when the system finds some vendors that you just want to ignore. But if the crawler found a vendor, then it means that there is something on your website. So it makes sense to not just ignore the thing, but also take action, meaning go on your website and remove the vendor from your page, or the code that this vendor is using. So it's you can ignore it, but you should not completely ignore it. At the end, you create your vendor list based on what the crawler recommends you, or you can always also just add custom vendors. There's a long list of, I think, 2,500 vendors in the list. You can also create your own vendors. It all comes to the same result. Once you have the vendors in the list, you assign them to a purpose, as we said before. That's where it makes sense then to have purposes that that match your vendors. If you have purposes where you don't have a vendor, then just remove the purpose and say, okay, we don't need to use this because we don't have a vendor there. So that's all these settings. At the end, as I said, you get a code. I will just skip this whole integration section for now. We will go back later to this. Instead, I will go into the design section because designs somehow also belong to the CMPs. In the designs, again, you have this modal. You can see a preview of your designs, or you can just take the list view. It's a bit more, the overview view is a bit easier. You can always create a new design, and then you just edit this thing. In the design editor, you have on the left side all the settings for design. On the right side, you have the preview. You can see I already played with this design. It looks already very. We had a webinar this morning. It looks already very Yeah, customized, let's say. As you see in the settings, there's always some more settings. There's advanced settings, more advanced settings, more advanced settings. So you can always expand here and expand there. So there's a lot of settings that you can do. In most cases, so that's the more general settings on the left side that you have. If you want to customize the consent layer, the most settings you can just do by right-clicking on the directly in the preview. So if I right-click on the headline here, then this left side changes, and I can just say, "Give me cookies," right? So I can just change this here, underline, and I don't know, this should be red, something like this. And I can do the same basically for everything in there. So I can also go and change the button, let's say the color and the size of the text, maybe, and should be bold. Or I want to go into custom settings. So there, in this case, I right click, no, I left click, right? So the normal left click, I can use this. If I right click, then I edit this thing. Here, this also where I played around earlier today. So I can just change this, or I don't know, change the headline to normal size, navigation. Yeah, so you see, it really gets beautiful if you play around with it. There's millions of settings that you can do. It's literally, I mean, we've not yet seen any client that can't achieve the goals that you want to achieve. There's a lot of settings that you can just do by right click. As I said, there's more settings that you can do in the left navigation. Things like what kind of buttons you want to have, one reject or accept, or the order of the buttons. Same for the custom settings page, what kind of buttons you have there. A lot of things like this, but kind of toggles you want to use, millions of different toggles. We have behaviors. That's like if the user scrolls on a page, it should the banner should disappear, or should be if the user clicks on the background of the page, the banner should disappear. Things like this. We have targeting, so that you say, okay, this design is, let's say, only for smartphone users, for example. So then the system will use this design only for smartphone users. So you would create another design, a second design for desktop users or tablet users, etc. You assign them both to the CMP as we've seen before, and then the system will, when the user is visiting the website, it will check these designs and see, aha, okay, this design is for smartphone or for desktop. The user is a smartphone or a desktop user. Let's use the one design or the other design. In addition, you also have custom CSS, custom HTML to further refine these settings, these design things. You can really change all the stuff in there. Most clients don't need it, just to say that this way. We have a lot of pre-created designs or default designs that you can use. If you like one of those, you can always just copy this design and so that you have a starting point basically. So that's usually the easier way. Then for each design, if I just go back, you also have a bigger preview so that you can have a bit of feel, okay, how it looks like in a mobile phone or in a tablet, etc. Different versions. And then also you have all the languages and the translations. So if you click on the country icons here, so if I want to change the language text, I can do this in the settings, in the preview of the settings, but I can also go to the texts and change it here, because here it's usually a bit easier. You have all the text fields. For a translator, that's easier to work with instead of clicking around in the design. And you see there's a lot of possibilities, and that's for all of these languages. Okay, so that's the design part. Then one step more, the compliance. Therefore, I will go back to a different account, because this account does not have any reports in it. It's hard to show something if there's no reports. So, now I've changed the account. So under compliance, you have the cookie crawler, the risk report. Cookie crawler is the report of what the crawler is doing. It will do a compliance test for you, meaning it will go on your website twice. Once it will click on accept, and once it will click on reject. And it will then, so accept is in order to see everything. Reject is in order to see what happens if if everything is working as it should, basically. So if I click on reject, it should not show marketing cookies, for example. If the crawler still finds marketing cookies, then you will get an alert and some warnings, different tests that the crawler will do. It will tell you which kind of issues. You can expand these and see, okay, Google Ads is setting some non-essential cookies before consent is given, on our test page. What domains were found, where was it found, what's the issue, how should I fix this, a link to the help section, etc. So basically, concrete steps that you need to do or that you should do in order to resolve these issues. Also, you will see a list of all the vendors. So everything that was found, not only the ones with issues, so that you get an overview. Also there you can expand again and see what's happening there, kind of cookies, etc. And at the bottom, you also have a like a vendor tree. So that's your website here, and then each of these lines represents a connection to one of the other vendors. So the website is loading this next vendor. It's AdSpear GmbH. It's an advertising vendor, and this advertising vendor is loading the next one, PubMatic, and this next one is loading the next one. And you see, so that's why this tree, that's why you have so many advertising vendors. So if you ever wondered why you have so many vendors, that's a good way to see how this ended up on your website. Also to understand what happens if I block PubMatic, for example. So if I block PubMatic, then all these other vendors would also be blocked. So that can be a good thing if you want to look from the compliance perspective. You understand what to do, what to block to get these vendors away. But it can also be a bad thing from a, let's say, monetization perspective. I mean, that's all advertising. So that's your earnings, basically, if you're a company that lives from advertising. So maybe you don't want to block PubMatic because then you also lose the advertising earnings from the other companies. So that's where this tree can help you. Then we also have the risk report. That's basically analyzing the settings that you have. So our legal team is basically checking all the the latest court rulings and guidelines from DPAs, etc. And according to these, we will adjust our checks. And the system will then basically check what kind of settings you are using and will inform you, okay, there is a setting that you shouldn't use based on these court rulings or these guidelines. For example, in this case here, we have a design that doesn't have a recheck button. That's a high severity and a big issue, or smaller things like visitors are asked too often, toggles are separated. So certain settings. Basically, there can be that tomorrow there's a new court ruling and the court says, okay, headlines need to be green or something. Then our legal team would put this into the system, and then the system would also check for these things and would inform you, oh, wait a second, you don't have a green headline. It's just an example, but just to highlight how these things work. So that's the compliance part. And then we also have the reports part. That's where you can see the actual data of your website or your CMP, your apps, etc. You can filter and you can group. You can also combine the groups. You can combine the filters however you want. And then you just click on Show Report. And then it takes a second to create a report. And then you get a report. So in this case, I group by day. If I would have grouped by, let's say, design, and I would see the different designs. If I would have grouped by browser, then I would see the different browsers. Or if I would group by browser and design, then I have the combination of browser design. So basically same data, but in a different, from a different perspective. And here you see all the relevant data. So the visits, the page views, how often the consent layer was shown, acceptance, reject, auto accept. That's the users that are automatically opted in. So in this case, here we have some US users. A bounce rate, that's the users that leave the website. And accept or pay. So if you have an accept or pay model on your website where you need to either accept or log in or pay, then we can also track these numbers. And you see the blue plus signs here, so you can expand all of these. And you see there's a lot of data, a lot of information in there. So marketing people usually really love this level of detail that you can see. And as I said, you can group and filter this in all dimensions. You can export it as a CSV, Excel, PDF, etc. There's an API to it, so you can put it in your BI system. Lots of things that you can do. Crawler report will give you a high-level report of the crawler, what they did, or how many cookies they found. Benchmark report is a basically comparing your data to other clients from the same industry. So in this case, we said we are a business directory with travel industry. And basically it will show, that's from our test page, the value, and the industry average from our other clients is higher or lower. So that gives you an understanding of, is my data, are my results good or bad? Should I continue optimizing? Should I do more? Or am I already good? So in this case, for example, the acceptance rate that we have here on this demo page is 91%. It's much higher than the industry average, so that's a good case. But for example, the bounce rate is also higher than the industry rate, so that's a bad thing, right? So you don't want to have the users leave your website; you want to have them stay. So in this case, there could be some more optimization in the bounce rate. So that's what the benchmark report tells you, and the optimization report is basically the result of the A/B testing. When you have multiple designs, it will show you which designs performed how, the acceptance rate, the likeliness to outbeat the best performing design, so that you get the chance that this design is really the best and not just by mistake, so to say. Different times, the comparison acceptance rate versus bounce rate. So basically you want to see the designs in this top left corner there. High acceptance rate, low bounce rate. Designs that are in the right lower corner are basically the worst. High bounce rates, user leaving the website, and low acceptance rate. So the further you can move your website in this corner, the better it is. And then some indicators on which designs work best for which kind of combinations, etc., so that you can draw your conclusions and create the next design in a certain way, or add the buttons, change the button, change the color, etc. So that's the overview on the account. As said before, we skipped the section on the whole implementation part. So for this, I will go back to the PowerPoint. So that's this here. So when you're in the system, in the CMP settings, at the bottom, you've seen there is a link for the codes. In the link, there is a box where you can download the code. There is a tab for either an automatic blocking code or a semi-automatic blocking code. Maybe I just quickly get back to the browser again just to show it. So in the CMP section there, we have codes for websites, and then you have this code for automatic blocking code and the code for semi-automatic blocking. We also have a lot of plugins. So if you have a shop or CMS system, we recommend to use the plugins, but you can always use also the manual integration. Same for the apps. Apps is a bit more complicated. There are some guides. We have privacy policy codes that you can put in your page to show the privacy policy, codes for the cookie list so that you can put the cookie list in your existing privacy policy. Same for the vendor list and the privacy preference setup. And then for TV devices, that's getting even more complicated. But back to the codes. As said, the codes don't change anymore, but you need to put them in a page. There's these two versions, automatic blocking, semi-automatic blocking. They work a bit different. That's why we go back to PowerPoint. So the automatic blocking code is the simple and easy and quick way. You just take the code, copy and paste it, put it in your website. The only requirement there is it needs to be the first thing in your website. So in the code, the highest or the earliest in your website code, you just need to paste it in there. That's the kind of only requirement. All the other settings, you just go into our system and do the settings there. So it's fairly easy to install, but it comes with some downsides. It is synchronous, meaning it slows down the website a bit. It's not significant, meaning a normal user will not feel it. It's some 100 milliseconds, but you can measure it, right? So it's a search engine optimization tool will see that your website is now 100, 200 milliseconds slower. That can be the 100 or 200 milliseconds that push you over the edge. Maybe you have been at 900 milliseconds before, now you're at 200, now you're at 1.1 seconds. And that's you exceeded the magic 1 second rule, so to say. And maybe your search engine optimization, your position might be a bit lower too because of this. So it's a bit slower. It is not always compliant, meaning there's modern browsers, they start downloading all the elements of the page at once. So it can be that basically our code is not able to block because the browser started downloading certain things already. It is not fail-safe, meaning if our system stops working for whatever reason, I mean, kind of never happens, right? But if it happens, then the blocking doesn't work. So there's no data protection, so to say. There's all just data processing. So it's not fail-safe, and it doesn't work with GTM. So if you have GTM in your page and you want to deliver our codes via GTM, then it's the semi-automatic blocking code. What the automatic blocking code is doing is basically you put it on a page, it will see, okay, there is, let's say, Google Analytics or YouTube video in the page, and it will automatically block these codes. It will automatically block YouTube, Google Analytics, everything else. It will wait for consent. So the user makes the choice, and when the user gives consent, it will automatically unblock so that Analytics and YouTube and whatever you have on your page can start again. So it's nice and easy because it's automatic, but as said, it has some downsides. The semi-automatic blocking code is a bit more complicated, and therefore it is very safe, it's compliant. It is asynchronous, meaning the website will load quicker, it will not slow down the speed of your website. It's fail-safe, so when our system stops working, the data processing will stop on your website, so it will not, your users are not exposed to data processing that they did not consent to, and it works with GTM. But as I said, it's harder to integrate, meaning if you have an analytics code, let's say, on your page, let's see an example down there in this screenshot here, that's an analytics code, you will need to adjust these third-party codes. So every third-party code that you have on your website, you need to adjust it. The adjustment is this red line here. That's what I added here. So it's not much. It's not complicated. It's always the same. The only thing here that changes is the vendor ID. So it's not, you don't need to be a pro developer to do this. It's just something that you need to do. So you need to have access to the source code of your website, and you need to have a bit of time. If you have a small website and you just have Google Analytics and I don't know, YouTube in the page, okay, that's two things. You just change it and that's fun. Maybe if you have a bigger website and you have some 100 vendors, then it can be a bit more effort, right? So that's what the difference is. For smaller clients, for clients with less technical expertise, we usually recommend the automatic blocking code just because it's easier. It's good enough, so to say. And for clients, enterprise clients, bigger clients, and clients that have the technical knowledge and the manpower, we recommend the semi-automatic blocking code. Okay, so that's this part. Then as a last view, the add-ons that we have in the system. So this year we started adding some additional features that you can use alongside with the cookie banner. We've seen the privacy policy generator before. That's one of them. And also we have the whistleblowing tool. So just a quick info on this. So whistleblowing is, there's a new law in Europe. Companies with 50 plus employees need to support whistleblowing in some form, so 50 years or a certain industry like finance and insurance. So you need to enable whistleblowing for your personal, for your employees, or for interested third parties, so that they can basically complain about things or notify you about things that are happening in your company or that your company is doing wrong. It should be in an oral form or written form, and in the written form, that's where Consent Manager comes in. Just to skip this, so to say, the written form is we provide you a way to create this whistleblowing form. So you just go into our system, click on whistleblowing, create this form. You get an HTML code, put this HTML code in your website or in your intranet or somewhere where your employees can reach it, and then they can use this form in order to submit their information to blow the whistle, basically. In the Consent Manager system, you will see, there's a new information. You can see the status. You can see the information, what they send. There are certain timelines that you need to fulfill. You need to ensure confidentiality. You need to have some certain follow-up measures. Follow up with the issues, right? fix them in best case. You need to document and what you have done, etc., and what you need to store this stuff. So that's where our tool can help you to streamline this process a bit. Whistleblowing is the one thing. The other thing is the privacy-friendly analytics. Again, you find this in the main menu. There's another icon for this. So it's a privacy-friendly way to measure the website visitors. It is not Google Analytics. It's not meant to be Google Analytics. The target or the aim here is to be easy, simple, and give you a quick overview. Nothing more, nothing less. Really just understand what's happening on my page. How many page views do I have? How many visitors do I have? What's the typical pages that these people visit? Where do they come from? What's the operating system, countries, etc. And a bit of the marketing sources that I'm using. This whole thing is privacy friendly because we don't use cookies, we don't use local storage and these kind of things. We don't store personal data, and we don't track the users. So that's where the problems usually arise. In addition to this, we have servers in Europe and no cloud service, etc. So that's where the privacy friendliness comes in. Friendliness, the important part does not mean that it's always consent free. Depending on the country and the state you are in, the local DPAs might say this still needs consent. So there's countries that are totally fine with analytics to run without consent, so you can track all the users, can measure this stuff. But there's also countries where their local DPAs are a bit more strict, and you should ask for consent even for this privacy-friendly analytics. Just as a heads up there. Yeah, and then we're already at the end. We are good on time, actually. It's good. As said, we have the Q&A box in Zoom, so feel free to put your questions there. Otherwise, you can always send your questions to support@consentmanager.net. So also a support team can help you, or go online to help.consentmanager.net for our help section. They also find, I think, like 200 pages or something of everything that you can do in the system. So feel free to put some questions in the system, but so far nobody had questions. That's also good. It means that I explained everything. It's always perfect. Let's give it a minute, maybe. Otherwise, if nobody has questions, then I would say thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. As said, always feel free to reach out, visit our website, and yeah, have a nice day. Goodbye.